a connection with divinity is a way in which you can maintain, improve your emotional health. And I think that's the connection that I didn't make. And when I say emotional health, I mean a sense of peace, a feeling of happiness. Where do we look for happiness? Because it's inside of us, but we're always looking for it outside. You can have an awareness of these spiritual practices, and it's great. But if you don't do the practice, by grace, things will happen because they're going to happen by grace. But practice is the key.
Before we jump into this episode, I'd love to invite you to join this candid spiritual community to hear more conversations that will help you become happier, healthier, and more healed. All I want you to do is click on that subscribe button because I love your support. I love seeing all the comments pouring through, all the love pouring through, and we're just getting started. I can't wait to go on this journey with you, whether you're a spiritual seeker or you're just curious about the topic. And we really hope that our conversations will provide you food for thought and inspiration for your own spiritual journey. So join us for honest, candid discussions about spirituality for soul's sake. I am joined by none other than Nina Rao, who is a very well accomplished Kirtan leader, someone that I look up to as an elder of myself, someone that's been propagating Kirtan for many years. But actually found, and I could get this totally wrong, so she's going to have to correct me if I get it wrong, but she found Kirtan in 1996 and then found her spiritual teacher, Sri Siddhi Ma, in 1998, and then has gone on to really create this revolution of Kirtan alongside Krishnadas in the world. And I'm deeply grateful that you're here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Radhika.
It's an honor. I feel like, just like I was with Katie, I'm in the presence of greatness here. I'm with someone that has walked the path many years before me and maybe can teach me a thing or two.
Well, like we were talking about before, there's something to learn from anyone you speak to, really, literally. And I will make a small correction.
Yeah, please.
When I met Krishnadas in 1996 is when I reconnected with Kirtan, actually.
Right.
And that was here in New York, actually, in this neighborhood where Jiva Mukti used to be. It was on 3rd Avenue and 9th Street. And I used to chant with Krishnadas there, and there were like 15 people in the room. But the time when I first heard him chant, which was in September of 96, I didn't grow up in India. I spent my time off and on there, but my grandfather lived there. So we would go back from wherever we were living to his home in the village.
Where is that? Where in India?
It's a small place called Bekal, which is on the coast of, actually is in Kerala, but it's also on the border of Karnataka. So
nice.
We speak Kannada, but they spoke Malayalam at home too. And it was a beautiful, those South Indian tile houses where everything's open and cashew orchard, coconut trees, mangoes. And so for us, it was like a paradise to go there, other than the insects, because we didn't quite get used to that, and cobras and scorpions. But it was a really beautiful time of my childhood. And my grandfather was an engineer for the British government. So I always saw him as a retired engineer, fixing the well, fixing the pump, doing this, doing that. But he had a harmonium at home. And it was one of those old-fashioned foot pedal ones.
Oh, nice.
And he could play with both hands, So I said, play something for me. I want to hear, because I had wanted to learn piano, which I never did, and I never have, and never learned any instrument till now. And he said, I will, but you have to sing with me. So I was wondering, what is he going to sing? I used to sing my songs that I sang in choir, I'd pick it out and figure it out. And he said, well, I'll sing and you'll repeat the line. So that was my first experience of what is Kirtan, And we sang this beautiful bhajan to Ganesha. It's part of our family, deity family. And but then he started to sing these Purandara Das bhajans that he would sing on his own, and he could play bamboo flute. So he was sort of a natural
engineer.
Singer. Yeah.
Wow.
Singer and musician, and his sister could play classical violin, so they would play together. I don't know. See, now I wish these people were alive so that we could podcast with them. And
we could get to know what went on.
Yes. when we were young, at least I didn't have the presence of mind to ask those questions. Whereas my children and my sister's children, they all ask my mother these questions, but I never did. I missed that.
Yeah. What to do?
Yeah. So that was where I first heard it. And he used to have satsang at home. People from the village came, the women sat on one side, the men sat on one side. There was no drum or anything. And I think when other people led the kirtan, they didn't even use a harmonium. They just had the cymbals, and then people would sing, and everybody would hang out, and there would be prasad. And I thought, wow, what is this feeling? Like, that was my first understanding, other than when I went to chapel in my Christian schools, of what is satsang, like what does it mean to be together, turn toward divinity in this way, and in search of something, which now we can put words to it. We're looking for the truth, we're looking for love, we're looking for peace, we're looking for community, all those things. And I didn't understand really what that was. I just knew the feeling. And so when I chanted with Krishnadas as a part of my yoga teacher's class, and I was very apprehensive. I was like, I don't know, this white guy wearing black sweatpants.
Doesn't look very authentic to me.
Not at all. At first I only saw his name. So I thought it's, I used to listen to classical music, but I thought, this is going to be a failed Indian musician, which is so ridiculous because even the failed Indian musicians are fantastic. So never mind that. That's just my immaturity at the time. And he walked in and I said, oh my God, this is going to be worse. This is worse. This is not even an Indian, it's going to be some kind of, I don't even know what. But on the side table was a photo of Maharajji and Hanumanji. And I thought, what's happening over here? And he opened his mouth. And I realized 3 hours later that I had moved from the back of the room and I was sitting right in front of him. And my whole world changed. Then I understood there was a thing called the spiritual path. I mean, our family had altar, we did puja. I didn't understand.
We saw it as a tradition.
Yeah, as exactly. It was like a cultural way, a tradition. I loved it, but I didn't see that it was part of my emotional health. I didn't understand that. And so I realized I had to come to the West because all the Westerners went there seeking that kind of help. And then they were able to integrate the Indian practices into psychology, into social welfare. Like all the devotees of Maharajji who came back, not all, but many of them came back and did what they had to do. And I feel like I benefited from that by just meeting Krishnadas and Ramdas and everybody after that.
Amazing. I mean, since that time, just such a beautiful description of the passage of being with your grandfather, meeting Krishnadas, and now going on to I guess in one sense, there's a major gap in between, but going into the modern day and the way in which chanting is being shared now. Obviously, we're starting from the point of your grandfather where there was basically this authentic, traditional path now being presented, I guess. I'm doing like this, like it's a lower, but actually it's the same.
Yeah, it's a seesaw.
Yeah, it's a seesaw. We're seeing a resurgence almost of a new generation coming into the world of chanting. Do you have any feelings about it? Do you have any thoughts? Anything that particularly comes to mind about the generational changes or, the new age that's coming in?
I think they're very fortunate that the spiritual traditions are so widely available to them, particularly so because of social media. I mean, there's some downfalls with that, but
of course,
it's okay. They have access. And for me, like I said before, I had to come to the West to really expose myself and intellectually understand. But it was also very much part of the heart because these are all devotees, So the way in which it was taught, it wasn't something that I had to learn. It was a transmission, as we all have, from our community, from our teachers, from other traditions, books we read, pictures we see of divine beings, any which way. But it opened for me. It opened in that way. So, when I first went to see Siddhima, or actually a couple of years later when I took my baby, she was 4.5 months old.
Wow.
And I wanted to take her for Ma's darshan, So I put her on the floor in front of her and I said, Ma, and she said, look at her, look at this baby. Look at her samskaras that she's like born into Maharaji's temple. And look at you. You had to wait till you were like 32 years old or whatever it was, to fall onto this path. So they have those blessings, which doesn't mean that life will not bring them obstacles, but at least they have that foundation. They have that understanding. Like she's born right into the satsang. If you saw her, you wouldn't necessarily see that. She doesn't wear it in that way. But inside of her, it lives.
Yeah.
And so, people ask me all the time about spirituality now. And for me, I came to the West. I refound what was already in my lineage. And now I go back to the roots of my lineage. And so I'm studying Veda and that type of chanting because for me that resonates very deeply.
Amazing.
Very deeply. And I found a teacher in India who I love, who's a woman.
Amazing.
The things that were not accessible before was very much a man's world. And here is this young woman who's my teacher, and she's studying from a traditional lineage. And they are really the holders of this ancient practice passed down from generation to generation, and they hold it very in a strict way.
Yeah.
And for me, that's where I want to go. I still sing Kirtan because I love it, and I love being in the West. I love chanting with Krishnadas. That hasn't changed in all the years because what's coming through in the chanting has very little to do with his pronunciation or his Western accent or his Western being. It's coming from that heart space that we all share. And so when Maharaji said Sab Ek, that's the space it's coming from, and that's where we're all going. So I feel very grateful that I'm able to chant. A lot of the people who chant with me are young people, actually, women, also young, men and gender neutral people, various people from all kinds of backgrounds, and not necessarily Indian. So I think it's a beautiful thing, but I do wish to say for people, unlike the way in which asana practice or the physical yoga practice has been separated from the spiritual practice, I wish for people to look into the tradition of where these chants come from. You don't have to know the stories, but why not?
Yeah.
Let's read the Ramayana. Let's read the Bhagavatam. Let's read the Devi Bhagavatam. Let's understand, where does this bhakti sit in India, so that we can... Actually, it's so useful for us, so why not?
Yeah, I think that's really a profound observation, because I feel that the spiritual circles and the Kirtan circles and the chanting circles are moving towards accepting God, whereas previously they were maybe done in a more secular fashion. But now it's less... I don't feel nervous, for example, speaking about God, where previously, even just 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when I first entered into this world of Western style presentation of or outreach style chanting, it was a lot more frowned upon. It was no, we just want the health benefits. We just want the mind to be settled. We just want the internal self to be peaceful. God, let's not go down that route. Whereas now it's a lot more, maybe that's a case of my own confidence with the practice, and that's maybe there. But I think just an observation point of the way in which societies accept is cyclical, and we're in a cycle where people are willing to hear more about the absolute truth, God, divinity, etc. And so, yeah, I guess I also want to express my gratitude to persons like you, because I feel like I stand on your shoulders, and everything that you set the foundations for my generation can reap the benefits. And so, yeah, it's with a deeply...
Where did you grow up?
Grew up in London, and born and raised there.
And did you start your practice as a young child?
I started my practice when I was a child. My mum was very much appreciative of the Vedic East and the Ramayana was her favorite, and my father also used to love the Ramayana. And so in the car on the way to school every day, they'd play the Chalisa. And
really?
that was the first thing I learned. And even at that time, it was just like a karaoke, you know,
Yes.
it was a cultural thing to do. I had no connection. I liked the image of Lord Hanuman. I thought it was cute. And I liked the story of the Ramayana and many of the pastimes of Lord Hanuman I appreciated.
I read Amar Chitra Katha comics all the time as a kid. Yeah, for sure.
But I never, it's like you said, I never connected it as being a process by which I could understand a relationship with Lord Ram or Lord Hanuman. And that kind of came on later. So, yeah, it comes with different people at different times. And I'm conscious about it now having kids, because I'm trying my best to impart this upon them without forcing them upon it. But like you said, just placing some skaras, giving the impressions.
Yes.
And then of that, if the bamboo decides to shoot, then it does. And if it doesn't, it doesn't.
Well, we may not see it.
We may not see
even if it does shoot.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And I see so many children from the era of when the Westerners went to be with Maharaji, and they came back, and their kids, they may not all be involved in the same way, but they feel the invisible container.
Definitely, yeah.
And it is a refuge.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. And the same with our kids. Where I think the switch will happen is, I understood it. A connection with divinity is a way in which you can maintain, improve your emotional health. And I think that's the connection that I didn't make. And when I say emotional health, I mean a sense of peace, a feeling of happiness. Where do we look for happiness? And because it's inside of us, but we're always looking for it outside. So then when you lay that on top of your psychological being, that's when it fuses together and it starts to make sense, if you practice.
Yeah.
So that's the key. So you can have an awareness of these spiritual practices, and it's great. But if you don't do the practice, by grace things will happen because they're going to happen by grace. But practice is the key, whatever that is for you.
Yeah, it's a point that I think a lot of people are recognizing that discipline is required in spirituality. I think that there was a long period, maybe it may be just a self-projection of my own views, where I felt that I saw spirituality was seen as something very loose and very abstract, and not something that required practice, but would just, the clouds would part one day, the sun rays would hit the head, and there you go, you have it. You have love of God, or love of each other, or love of that which is within, etc., etc. But I think that this understanding of the need of discipline, I'm trying to remember, there's a quote about it that is somewhere in there, but it's being comfortable with discomfort. Practice, yes, eludes that it's going to be uncomfortable. There's going to be something that you're going to have to draw from within. There's going to be purification, a process of purification. Oh, here it is. The pain of discipline is uncomfortable, but the pain of regret, of not having reached the potential of what's there, having practiced, that pain is unbearable. So which do you choose? The pain of discipline being uncomfortable, the pain of regret as being unbearable. And so exactly what you said about practice, it's my bead bag, my chanting beads on the table, and every time I walk past, I'm like, maybe another 5 minutes, and maybe then, or the Gita's here, and maybe 5 minutes later. That's painful to pick it up, or sometimes even to just jump in when there's no taste. But yeah, the pain of regret. Can I imagine a life without them? No, I think I need them.
Yeah, I mean, it really is food for the soul. And the thing about practice also, I think, is that at first when you find it, and your heart opens in that way, you turn towards it. But of course, to do anything regularly is difficult for us because we're so distracted every minute of the day.
We have weapons of mass distraction all around us.
All the time.
Yeah.
Even our phones.
Yeah.
And, but there's a certain level of comfort in maintaining a discipline. Like it starts to become a habit. It's creating a new habit, new samskar, like the same grooves that we were talking about. You are able to change the way your mind even thinks and get focused. So the practice makes you more focused. The rewards of the practice deepen your faith in the practice. And then ultimately, the practice then becomes the journey and the path and the destination.
Wow.
All
beautifully said. Yeah.
Right? At least that's how it is for me. And I mean, are there days when I don't feel like practicing? Yeah, I watch TV. Let me watch my soap operas or whatever it is that's going to make me like not think. But I have maintained a certain amount of practice every day. Even if it's, and this is what I say to everybody, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Even 5 minutes. Just say you're going to sit down and do the same thing every day, whatever that is for you.
Yeah.
Whether it's japa, or you're going to read something, you're going to just breathe for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah.
Siddhima was very clear about that.
Really. Practice every day.
Developing a habit in order to purify and to let go of the things that are obstacles in your path. You know, perhaps maybe a little overindulgence in this kind of food or that kind of activity, or, you know, creating a structure for yourself will help you do more practice. And then also finding like-minded people who want to practice is very helpful, as you know. I mean, would you sit in your room and chant for 2 hours? Maybe you would. But when you know that people are coming and you're going to chant together, it just makes it so much more fun. And the energy is so helpful for you. So,
definitely.
Yeah. She was very clear about practice. There was no
ifs or buts.
Nothing. Absolutely. Very clear. Yeah.
I think one thing that's really wonderful is in this conversation is I think that the world of bhakti and the world of kirtan and chanting has in one sense become more open. Like it's something I spoke to Krishnadas about when we had our podcast, is that I feel that there's a sense of appreciation, whereas previously there was a lot of sectarianism. Like you're from this tradition, you're from this parampara, you're from that lineage, so you do you, and I don't think what you're doing is right, and your connection can't be bona fide, your connection is like this, and da-da-da-da-da. I think that spirit is starting, I think it's breaking.
That's actually true. I agree with you. Yeah. Like when you go to India, there still is a division, particularly about when you're talking about the more, let's just say, politically oriented spiritual leaders.
That's going to happen.
Yeah, and so that will always exist. But I found in the traditional teachers who, when they look at the students to see like who's really focused, for them, it is all one. This is just their path, but the destination is the same place. Yeah. And but the beauty of chanting with Krishnadas, like I remember when I first started chanting with Krishnadas, it's kind of silly, but it's true. My parents weren't living in the States, so they were in India. And they were starting to hear about me, like going to go and chant, you know. And so they said, they really got worried that I joined a cult, because there's a lot of that in India, right? False gurus, false spiritual teachers, take your money, run away. And I said, listen to me. I'm wearing the same clothes I always wear. Nothing is different. I haven't changed anything. There's nothing to join. And just come in. I'm going to show you some pictures of the people who come and chant. Just see, they're just like regular people, have jobs, they have children. But there was that little bit of fear that something had happened. But, you know, you go to, when people come and chant with you, people chant with me, chant with Krishnadas, those who, you know, used to come and see Ram Das and still do like to hear his teachings, just like regular people with family lives. Nobody wants anything from each other except for company.
Right.
And like-minded thoughts, conversations. And so, yeah, I think it has opened up.
Yeah.
And now, you know, I go to hardware stores or supermarkets or Whole Foods and, people recognize me, which is a very strange phenomenon for me. And they're young. And it's because they are searching themselves. They've had drug issues or alcoholic parents or whatever they might have. And they've started to hear the words of Ramdas. Or they've heard chanting in their yoga studio, and yoga's in gyms now. And you can find all kinds of ways to connect with the spiritual practice. And they want to know more and learn more.
Yeah.
So I think that's beneficial for everyone, given everything that's happening in the world that's so divisive. How are we going to overcome this? We have to come together. We have to understand, what does sab-ek actually mean, and how do we manifest that in the world? And we all each have our own way, and we have to live it.
Yeah. When it comes to chanting and the presentation, something that I've noticed in the last few years is that, I guess it's always been there, because you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, that there's always going to be those that really want to water it down to being something that it's really unauthentic or easy access. But how do we avoid people going down paths that perhaps are dangerous or destructive? Because you were speaking about fake gurus, and you were speaking about, that still exists today. We still see, I'm not one to call out people, but we do see people getting misguided, and, it happens even in big institutions, religious institutions are still happening today. Is there a way in which we can shelter people, or do you think that it's always going to be the case? Do you think this is, wherever there's the good, there's always going to be the yang, there's always going to be people that are going to misguide and try to use this as an opportunity to monetize and brainwash and bring people to a point of just simply being under their control, and sometimes in negative ways?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is the short answer.
Thank you.
It will always be that. Our job is to walk the path in the most authentic way that we can, in what we share, whether it's through the chanting or what we're speaking, and really be truth seekers. Really. And that implies questioning oneself all the time. And again, this is where practice comes in. Because when you practice, not only are you benefiting from the company of the people around you, there are many things that happen. First, you get to hear the stories of people and their suffering. When you hear their stories, then you can open your heart as compassionate. That's the first thing. Second thing with practice is that, especially when you use very specific methods of practice, like particular mantras, and you try to do it in the most authentic way to the way it's taught. Even Kirtan, chanting the name, it's what all the great teachers, including Siddhima and Maharaji, they all said. They said chanting the names of God is the practice for the Kali Yuga, because that's really all we might be capable of doing.
Right.
But the practice itself clarifies your mind. So if you take both of those things together, compassion and wisdom, those are the two sides of enlightenment in Buddhist philosophy, for example. But those are the two things we need in order to move in the direction of attaining the state of sab-ek, which is everybody's included, including ourselves, and maybe we don't exist anymore. I don't know. I'm not enlightened. I have no idea what that feels like. But we're on that journey, because I think the greatest hardship for everybody is the feeling of disconnectedness or separateness that causes the kind of pain, warfare, aggression, hostility that exists in the world today.
Wow.
So where do we find that love where we feel connected with each other in such a way? Where is that? It's inside of us, but we have all our kleshas, all the obstacles that are stopping us from constantly being in. We have moments, but when things go wrong, we can all react in a negative way, right? So the practice helps to open the heart, calm the mind, and then tread on the path in the way that's going to be helpful for us and everybody.
Thinking about your current practice, you mentioned about chanting Vedic mantras and you're really wanting to go deep in that particular area. I just want to know personally what's in your practice currently, what's alive for you, maybe there's some reading that you're currently studying that you want to share with people. I think everyone wants to know what's going on for you personally right now in your practice.
Yeah. So the core part of my practice remains the same and has been for the last whatever decades, and has many different parts. One is trying as much as possible that as soon as I wake up in the morning, I want to try to go to the place, that liminal space that we live in when we're sleeping, where anything is possible. To try to stay in that before I reach for my phone, before I look at my messages, before I start deciding what's going to happen next. And bring in the mantra, the japa, whatever mantra I might be, I have my mantra, as everybody does. Bring it into the awareness first thing in the morning, even if it's just 5 repetitions.
Wow.
Bring it in right away, because that'll set the tone
for the rest of the day.
Hopefully, and if it's not 100% every day, it's at least 5%. It can change everything if you open your eyes in that way.
I love that.
So that's one of my first things that I like to do. And then I have a regular practice of chanting Hanuman Chalisa that I do every morning. And sometimes I do it with a group, sometimes I do it by myself. That has been a core of my practice from the beginning, ever since I met Krishna Das and Siddhima. And then there's a lot of layers of stuff that's on top of that after that. So depending on the time of year, I like to read and chant Vishnu Sahasranam.
Oh, nice.
If it's during Devi time, Chaitra Navratri, or in the fall, I read the Bhagavatam and Chandi Path, like I like to chant for the goddess from there.
Nice.
But the thing that happens all the time is the Ramayana in some form or the other. I like to read different versions of it. So,
is there a particular version that you like, or someone that's...
I like them all. The one that Ma gave us to read is Tulsi Das's Ramcharitmanas. So that I read. And, I'll tell you a little secret. I actually cannot read Devanagari. I never studied it. And
Me neither. So.
Yeah, so I'm learning it. I'm relearning it now.
Cool.
I knew the alphabets, but I can't read texts easily. So my Veda chanting, my teacher is so forgiving. Everything is in English transliteration too. But now I'm trying to read the Ramayana in Devanagari, which is a very slow process. But I try to do like few lines every day and read the translation, and like really try to bring that into my practice. Even when I do Hanuman Chalisa, I read. Because I'm not singing with the harmonium, it's a recitation. Right. So I read while I'm doing the recitation. And there's so many things, Radhika Das. It's like I have my mala with me. But I recently met a very beautiful saint who's alive in the body. He's a Tibetan Buddhist Lama. His name is Garchen Rinpoche, and he lives in Arizona. After Siddhima left the body, I didn't think I would feel about another being the way I feel about him and his presence. He's about 82 or 83 now, and he escaped from Tibet. He was a prisoner in the Chinese prisons for 20 years.
Wow.
But this is the being who can say, I have experienced every possible suffering a human being can. And he can actually say that. And when asked the question, what was your greatest fear when you were in the prison? He said, my greatest fear was that I would lose compassion for my Chinese guards. Can you imagine a being that can say that? That the one who is imprisoning you is the one that you want to continue to cultivate compassion for. This is a true bodhisattva
Wow.
in that way. Just like the saints in our tradition also came from the same. It's just when I heard those words from him. And one of the things I love in the Buddhist tradition is that the idea of cultivating bodhicitta, which is the enlightened mind, wishing it for yourself, but also wishing it for all beings.
Wow.
So that's part of the practice. You start your practice raising bodhicitta. What a beautiful way to enter into practice, right? So one of the things that Garchen Rinpoche does, and I would like to do more, is he's always turning a prayer wheel. So I'm not sure if you've seen
I've
it.
seen.
And so in his mind, just like we might use a mala all the time and we may not be thinking about the mantra consciously while we're chanting, the moving of the beads is still doing the work of the transmission. It's good to do it with intention, like to sit quietly and hear your mantra under your breath or in your out loud or however you might do it. But for him, the prayer wheel is such a beautiful thing because inside of it are millions of recitation of the mantra in the form it used to be written on paper. He's put microfilm inside it, or microchip. So he says that every time you turn the wheel, you're transmitting that to the world. So how do you magnify your practice? Whichever way. And it could be so simple, like making sure you're chanting when you cut your vegetables and serve your food to your family. Or take a fruit and offer it to your altar in the morning. Whichever way we can do it. Whichever way.
Stop.
I would like to be able to remember that more and more. So that's part of my practice, like trying to remember how I can do more of that. Reading about saints is an amazing way to think about how do people live. And there are movies about all these incredible beings. Like, enter into the flow. I want to be in that flow as much as possible. And it doesn't mean you have to go anywhere because, again, like we were talking about in the beginning, you can learn from anybody you talk to. Try to see, this is something Ram Dass said. He would say, I want to see your soul. I see your role, R-O-L-E, in the world, but I want to connect with the soul inside of you. So how can we do that? Even with the FedEx person who was yelling at me yesterday when I was trying to mail a package, I was like, okay, let me try to look past that for a minute and breathe and see where is she coming from? What's happening? It's not about me. She's not angry with me. There's stuff going on and I need to return my piece of furniture that I need to get back to wherever. So how can we make this the path of least resistance? Just do what we have to do. Let her feel heard in whatever way she needs to be heard. I don't have to take on her negativity. So anyway, we can go on like this.
No, it's so beautiful, so poetic, the way you describe your practice, and deeply inspiring. Thank you. Yeah. I think that, I don't know, anything mundane now that we speak about is unnecessary, and I think that this is a nice place actually to which we can close the conversation, because I think there's enough juice in the tank for people to be able to re-listen to this conversation and find nuggets, find sutras, find moments where they can consider, reflect. Like while you were speaking, I was really churning inside what's alive for me as well. I think that process is going to be very much the case for anyone that's also listening to this conversation. And so, yeah, I'm just deeply grateful that you've decided to come here, spending the time with me, and I hope I can continue to learn from you because, like I mentioned, I stand on your shoulders, and those of the... Yeah, I'm not so light. I weigh, as they say in English, I weigh a pretty penny. So thank you so much. deeply appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. Radhika.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode. I hope you found it useful. I hope you found it interesting. I hope you found it transformational. I hope you found it all those words and more. Drop us a comment below. Share this conversation with a friend. Bring more people to the table of spirituality, of awakening higher consciousness. And if there's anything that you feel you want to know more, then please head over to all of Nina's channels. Check her out and hopefully go and chant with her soon. But looking forward to seeing you all on the next episode of The Soul's Sake. Thank you so much. Take care. Namaste. If you enjoyed this podcast, you're sure to appreciate my conversation with Janavi Harrison, where we delve into the crossroads of spirituality, progress, and relationships whilst I was in India.
Creativity and being artful is something that everyone has and everyone can access. And I think it's more about, again, connecting to that deeper place within ourselves of intuition and playfulness, the sense of lightness, which can be quite hard in life. There's a lot of things to feel heavy about, but we are much more like that naturally as children.